Thank you all for coming. Today is June 25th. We want to welcome you to the IAAM Center for Family History webinar series. Just want to let you know that the Center for Family History website is live, and there will be a slide that has the links on there. So these are just some of the brief resources that we'll have in the Center for Family History. The collections, we have research assistance, education and outreach, assistance with DNA testing, which would mean like which test to choose, what's your goal, and how to help organize your DNA, information that you get, and also about community archiving. We do have subscription databases that will be in at the center: ProQuest, Heritage Quest Online, Ancestry, of course, and Family Search, Accessible Archives, Genealogy Bank, and JSTOR, Southern Life and African American History. Here's some more: ProQuest, Records of Antebellum Plantations, and Records of Southern Plantations from Emancipation to the Great Migration. We also have a collection right at the moment of 150 pension files for United States colored troops. You are able to look at them. There will be more uploaded. And if you have any that you want to share, we welcome, and we'll be able to put them up. We will be targeted once all 1,000 pension records that we have purchased will be up on site. We'll have the largest collection outside of NARA. So definitely be able to view these pension files, which are very rich in information. This is some of the resources that we also have helping people in the communities, not just in Charleston, but throughout, because this is the International African American Museum, but there'll be other resources for folks to be able to see. We also have on-demand videos. So anyway, I am going to welcome everybody again to find out and learn about the Midwest African American Genealogy Institute. And we've got a couple folks that are not here yet, but Janice and I are here, and we will go forward. Just to give you a look, this is the MAAGI 2022 coordinators and faculty. Bernice Bennett, which is in the left-hand corner, she is one of the coordinators and the instructors. Dr. Alfred Brothers, Tony Carrier, Shannon Christmas. We also have Janice Minor Forte. Her audio right now is not coming through. And we've got Ron Graham, Terry Ligdon, Dr. Janice Lovelace, who is here with me, myself, Roberta Ridley, Judy Russell, Nika Sewell-Smith, Juliana Sukes, and we have Melissa. And Melissa Tennant is with Allen County Public Library. And then, of course, Angela Walton-Raji. Who's not pictured here is Rick Murphy and Renata Yarborough Sanders. She'll be joining us and teaching classes in track 1B. And she is in the chat room. So if there's any questions, I'm going to throw her out there and say she might be able to answer them for you. So welcome, Renata, and glad to have you on board. Okay. Now I'm going to stop sharing. And Janice, we are going to get this going. We have folks here that want to know about MAAGI. I'm going to start off with a little bit of history about MAAGI, because one of the things is, and I'm going to come off camera so I can save on the bandwidth a little bit. But one of the things about MAAGI that people don't know is that we started actually in St. Louis. And basically it was some folks in a van that said, you know what, we need to have something for MAAGI. We need to have a resource, some place that folks that are concentrating on African American ancestry, and they can have access, just like the other genealogy institutes, but none of them actually focus just on African ancestry. You have several notable genealogy institutes that every other year they might have a track on African American. Well, MAAGI is every year, typically in the first or second week of July, in which 2022 will be coming up July 12th through the 15th. And of course, MAAGIinstitute.org is the website, which again, I'll have a slide after that. But what MAAGI is set up as, there's 6 tracks. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the tracks, and then I'm going to bring Janice in, okay? And so what we came up with as from the historical aspect was these tracks that people would attend for 3 days. And they would attend and access these classes. And actually over the 3 days, there's 12 classes. So track 1A, which I oversee, and there's also track 1B. So track 1A is fundamental methods and strategies. Well, some of the classes that we teach during MAAGI is time and file management. We have Judy Russell teaching public records in the law, slavery in the law. You'll learn about so what, how to analyze documents. And of course, if any of you know me, we're going to walk through a whole session on timelines. We're also going to look at military information on research and possibly burned counties. So you're going to get an array. Tony Carrier will come on and present about mapping the Freedmen's Bureau. So those of you that don't hang out on Friday nights with us on Freedmen Bureau Friday, we definitely will have her walk through that website. So it's an awesome website, and definitely if you're doing any slave era research, this is a site you need to be familiar with in the collection from the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. And we also will have Rick Murphy coming in and talking about the first Angolans and researching through 1619 and how to access those records and what records are out there. He'll also be teaching a course on the Society of the First African Families. And again, how do you use a hereditary society to help in your genealogy research? And then, and Renata actually, and I can bring you up if you want to add anything, but methods and strategies for slavery era research is track 1B. So what's there? Again, we're going to get slavery in the North, slavery in the law. We have Janice Minor Forte that does a whole class on research in digital library on American slavery, your access in pre-emancipation documents, slave era documents. We've got Reconstruction era records, the key to breaking through the 1870 wall, which we know the Freedmen Bureau definitely helps us do this. There's case studies that will come through. Nika Sewell-Smith will be talking about case studies in gray, identifying shared ancestries through DNA. And Bernice Bennett, who is not with us today, she's actually celebrating her anniversary and is out on a cruise. So we wish her and her husband well. But she's going to be taking offering a couple classes on examining slave ship manifest, as well as slave runaway ads. Unbelievable. The research that's done and what comes out of these classes definitely will help advance your research. So what I'm going to do now is turn it over to Janice Lovelace to talk about track 2A and 2B. Janice, come on, you're one of the instructors throughout both of those tracks.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I talk about DNA. So track 2A is the introduction level, and track 2B is the more advanced DNA. We have 3 days. The first day both sections are together and we cover basics. We talk about, kind of what is DNA, and then we go into some different ways that you can use DNA, talk about making a research plan using DNA. And the second and third days, we split into the beginners and the more advanced folks for DNA. And for the beginners, we talk about what is DNA and how am I going to use it and how do I figure out all of those matches? And we really focus on the autosomal DNA. For 2B, they go deep into using different ways of figuring out your DNA, the mitochondrial, the Y DNA, as well as autosomal DNA. So we've got something for everybody in terms of talking about DNA. If you're kind of getting started, you're just not sure what tested and now what, you want to start with 2A. If you've been working with your DNA for a year or two or more, you want to think about 2B and, how can I go to the next level in working with my DNA? How can I figure out the segments and so forth?
So I have a question for you, Janice.
All righty.
And again, if there's any questions, you guys can put them in the chat. And I want to ask for 2A, you said that's more like beginning. So do you walk through the different tests and which one might be appropriate for which person? Because I know when I first took DNA tests, I really was just joining in, trying to figure out what am I going to do here and stuff. And let me come off camera. I can save a little, but just what do I do? I get this information back, and I'm talking about in the early 2000s, like 2004, I think is when I took my first test with one of the companies. And I don't even believe Ancestry had DNA at the time. I did national, was it Genographic or something like that project? It was DNA. But when I got it, I didn't know what I was looking at. I mean, I get the gist of it now, of course, but do you help people? Because for that beginning, I think it's so critical that people understand that there's different types of tests. And do you guys walk through that?
We absolutely do. And so on the first day, we go through the different kinds of tests and what you're going to find out with each of those tests. That the mitochondrial, you're going to be looking at the maternal line, and with the Y DNA, guys are going to be looking at the paternal line. And with autosomal, you're going to be looking at both of those lines, but only 4 or 5 generations back. And so we do cover that. We cover in the 2A section on the second day, I go into big detail about each of the tests and each of the 4 big companies that offer autosomal DNA, and then family tree DNA, which offers the mitochondrial and the Y DNA. And give examples. Okay, so you've tested and this is what it looks like. And here's how you're going to find those matches. And this is what, if you match somebody at this amount, this is what it means, what kind of relationship you have. So for the 2A, really that depth of each of those companies, so that if you've decided you're going to test at one place, you may decide, you know what, I'm going to test it somewhere else because I can get some slightly different information. Or I can get some people who tested at Ancestry, then you go over to Family Tree DNA and you might get a different group of people. And so you have some different matches.
Okay.
So hopefully, I think when people end up that they really understand the companies, they understand the information they're getting, and they know how to begin to work with their matches.
There's a question in the chat. They want to know, is there prerequisites for the DNA tracks?
There are no prerequisites other than you have to have tested. You have to have a DNA test by the time we get started so that you have something to work with. Now, there are some some reading that you need to do before the class starts.
Mhm.
And I don't know, Shelley, if people can still register or not.
DNA has actually closed
Okay.
on the DNA tracks, both of them. But I will tell for those that are in DNA and that are registered and also looking at 2023, that the students are required to have some materials. And number one is the Family Tree Guide to DNA Testing and Genetic Genealogy by Blaine Bettinger. And then there is Genealogy and Practice by Blaine Bettinger and Debbie Parker Wayne. And there is an assessment that 2B folks have to take in order to come in. And just as Janice said, you would have had to done it, have DNA results, you know, like your autosomal or other DNA test results in order. So they have a pre-screening type, I guess, thing that they go through, which has already been done. And, you know, they'll be able to create a spreadsheet on the results. Now, Shannon Christmas, Nika Smith, and Bernice Bennett, along with Dr. Janice Lovelace, they are the instructors, and she is correct. They will walk you through 2A. Now, 2B, I know Bernice is gone, but I'm putting a warning out right now. Y'all got to get in, hold on your seats, because they definitely will take you through, you know, how to, you know, definitely going through and analyzing that information. It's chock full of information. And so if you have the curiosity in going through DNA, and do you cover the private in 2A privacy and ethics? I know Bernice
Yes.
does the emotional side, but you cover the privacy and ethics surrounding DNA, correct?
Right. We cover that in the first day. So both sections
Okay.
are together that first day. And so we do cover the privacy issues. We cover the emotional aspect of DNA. Nika talks about the family DNA project. And like I said, I talk about kind of building a research plan for your DNA. So everybody's together on that one. And then on the second day, we break off and we get into more depth for the 2A, the different types of DNA testing and the different companies. And for 2B, more about how you use those results to go even deeper in finding information about people you're related to, maybe connecting with or knowing how to figure out segments and, you know, which segment of your DNA, which piece of the DNA came from which great grandparent. You know?
Well, and that's interesting because there's, you know, a lot of things happening with DNA.
Yes.
And I know also about the chromosome mapping and all of that kind of stuff. That's all in 2B. And also there's a class called Finding African Roots. So I know that's going to be covered. GEDmatch is another session, and that you guys, the people that are attending, will learn about it. So just like you said, it's got something for everybody. And I think when we added DNA to the tracks, it just blossomed. You know, they make the classes small. That's one of the things on the history of MAAGI for folks that might not know. But when we were in person, the first 3 years we were in St. Louis, the classes were very small. There was none of them were over like 10 or 15 people. So we kind of pride ourselves as MAAGI of having the smaller classrooms, even capping them in the virtual environment. So why? When we could have X amount of people on Zoom virtually? Well, number one, there's a lot of hands-on. That's the difference between a conference, genealogy conference, and an institute. You're going to be working. Yes, you probably have homework. I know you do in 1A. I know you do in 1B, you know, and I'm gonna speak for the other, you know,
2B has homework.
well, and 1B has homework. So, and I think about the time I visited Bernice in the slave ads. People basically, they have to go out and seek and find those ads and then come back and report on them and things. So again, we keep the classroom small because of the hands-on and the interaction with the instructors and so forth. And again, there's also follow-up after that. So I'm going to switch, since Janice hasn't been able to come in yet. I'm going to go ahead and share some information about track 3, which is the intermediate genealogy, which is pre and post-slavery era. So Juliana Sukes, Roberta Ridley, and Dr.
I'm in.
Alfred Brothers Jr. I'm sorry?
I'm in.
Oh, you're here.
Yes,
Go for it. Thank you. Janice, welcome.
I've
Thank
been
you.
here all the while. I'm
Yes.
in. Yes,
Okay, would you like to tell us about track 3,
Yes.
please?
I was part of the initial startup in that notorious blue van from 10 years ago
Yes.
at the birth of MAAGI. And I'm here today to tell you all about track 3, which is pre and post emancipation slavery. And to begin with, we kick off our first day with Julianne Suits, and she does 3 sessions on the various aspects of ancestry, the new stuff in ancestry, the how to find unique records in ancestry. And we end the day with Melissa Tennant. She always does a special session on African American studies at the Allen County Public Library in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is our home base now. We are so pleased to be at Allen County for the last, 5 years?
5 or 6 years, yeah.
Yeah, and then on our second day, which is that Wednesday, we start off with the wonderful Dr. Alvin Brothers, who is the all-out expert on military affairs. So he starts the day and finishes it with a complete study of African Americans in every single war since before the birth of America as we know it today. And then we finish Wednesday with a wonderful tale by Roberta Ridley. And she always has some surprising information for us. She walks us through what is known as those family secrets, the things that are whispered throughout the family about the heritage, and everybody whispers it and nobody knows it. And then you find out everybody knows the secrets, but she gives us ways of how to dig through the records of the family and some of the secrets of the family. And it's wonderful. I have sat through them for years and years.
Love it.
And it brings folks to tears. It brings folks to the laughter of the family, but it lets you know how your slave ancestors survived. And that's what we're all looking for, because after all, we are the products of our slave ancestors. And then on the last day, you have, guess who? Me? for 4 sessions. I should say just 3 sessions, because the 4th session is where I kind of cheat and I put you to work. I do, Shelley has always talked about the digital library. I do 7 secrets to finding your slave ancestors. And I do three other sessions. And then to close the day off, I break the group up into, I think it's 4 classrooms. And we challenge them. We give each classroom a different challenge. And so off they go. They spend a half an hour, 40 minutes. And here we're teaching people the importance of finding yourself and keeping a genealogy buddy, someone who knows as much about your research as you do. someone who will pick your brain, who will come up with a record source that you have not thought of. And then we end the day by coming back together again. And track 3 is always scolded because we're the last ones to end the day. But that is because with those, their students are busy, busy, busy in their classwork rooms, getting their classwork done. And then we close out and have it goes on to track 4. Are you doing track 4?
No, Angela's coming in. She's
Okay.
already promoted, but I do want to make a comment. I see somebody has posted in the chat, Janice doesn't allow you to doze off.
Nope.
She has candles and prizes to win. So yes, we've seen some of that feedback on Janice and her track, definitely. And we have a lot of testimony, you know, from folks that have attended and taken her track. So, you know.
The class for this year is closed.
Yeah.
We had to finally close it. As Shelley said, it's supposed to be, the institutes are supposed to be small and intimate, and we enlarged it and I finally had to close it at 30 students. So
yes.
Save your pennies, nickels, and dimes and get registered for 2023, when we hope we'll be in person again, because we still miss Wednesday night. Is it Wednesday night, Shelley?
Yeah, we'll have a virtual Wednesday night, brick wall night. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And so everyone that's attending MAAGI will get a Zoom link to attend that. And so thank you, Janice. And so that was the overview of track 3 and a little bit of history. And so I see that we have Angela Walton-Raji coming in to talk about track 4. Very timely. Appreciate it, Angela. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Oh, did I lose you?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we have you. So would you share information about the African Native American genealogy track 4 for us?
Yes, more than happy to. Yes, this will be actually the 3rd consecutive year that this track is being hosted. And this track pertains to the freedmen from the 5 tribes, the 5 so-called civilized, quote unquote, tribes, which are Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Muskogee Creek, and Seminole nations. These 5 nations, actually many people are unaware, and many people have heard of the Trail of Tears and the forced migration of Native people from the southeast to what is now Oklahoma. But little do they ever hear about the hundreds, or actually several thousand, people of African descent who went with them, not voluntarily. They went as enslaved people. After slavery ended officially in 1866, by the way, not 65 in Indian Territory. Slavery was abolished then, but people remained because after this point, this was home to them. And by the time of Oklahoma statehood in 1907, 20,000 people of African descent were tribal citizens. They were tribal freed people. And the records pertaining to these 20,000 people and their hundreds of thousands of descendants, the record set is absolutely amazing. And this is the 3rd year in a row we're going to talk about freedmen records. We will begin on that first day with Ron Graham, who will be talking not only about records pertaining to Creek freedmen, but also a little known Black history fact, as people like to say. In 1867, there was legislation that was attempted in Congress to establish a territory known as the Territory of Lincoln. The Territory of Lincoln was to have been an all-Black territory, to be under the direction of a governor. The governor was to have been a person of African descent. This was the initial plan that some people have heard about. Oh, I hear that they were going to make Oklahoma an all-Black state. Well, this is where some of that dialogue comes from. This was legislation that was initiated in Congress in 1867. It was quickly ignored and later just sort of went on the cutting room floor, so to speak. But he's talking about it. He shows a proposed map of where the territory of Lincoln was supposed to have been. He also, of course, in his second session, he goes into detail about Creek-Freedman records and how to research the almost 5,000 Creek-Freedman families.
5,000. Wow.
That's just one tribe out of
Wow.
outside. And so that sort of gets us sort of going. Then comes Terry Ligon, who comes in with, and many people who have ancestors who are both Choctaw and or Chickasaw freedmen have heard of Equity Case 7071. This was an effort that was to actually allow people to switch from the role of freedmen to the role of people by blood. There are many people who did have an Indian father, but they were still put on the freedman role because their mothers had been enslaved women. And which was kind of a big deal, especially in Choctaw and Chickasaw Nation, because if you were on the freedman role, every person, including the babies, the children, everyone got 40 acres of land. So if you had a family of, let's say, 10 people, oh, well, you have 400 acres of land that's now given to the family, which many people, hey, well, that's pretty good. You all got your 40 acres. We didn't get it in Mississippi. However, if your ancestors were on the blood roll, everyone, including the babies, would have received 320 acres. So that was why you had almost 2,000 freedmen who were really suing to be transferred from the freedman role to the blood roll. The case made it all the way to the Supreme Court when suddenly the lawyer who was representing them failed to file the brief. And suddenly the man who was their representative all that time, oh, I believe in this case, suddenly he lost belief in the case right before he gets to argue in front of the Supreme Court. And we're talking now early 20th century. So the case was dropped. It was never heard. But Terry goes into those records pertaining to the people in Equity Case 7071. That's one of his passions. I do know that his latest passion, which kind of ties in to Janice Lovelace's presentation of maps, because Terry has, I'll say, discovered a huge cadre of maps at the Oklahoma Historical Society. And then he also found allotment maps. And the reason why I say it ties into Dr. Janice Lovelace's presentation, because she gives a wonderful presentation on how to find your ancestors' land allotment. And particularly when you're dealing with lands that are outside of those 13 original colonies, and when you get into the Midwest and the Mid-South, you're dealing with plat maps. Well, she has a wonderful presentation on how do you interpret those plat maps with a bunch of squares on them. But if you look at the maps closely, you see there's one large square, and then you see some slightly smaller squares, and then you see some really small square. Well, the small squares generally represent 40 acres, but she very, very carefully explains what is the difference between when you're looking at the map. Well, what is a township exactly? What's a range? What is a section? All of which are described in the land records. Now, as I said, 20,000 people got land, and the purpose of the Dawes roll was to create a roll of people eligible to receive land allotments. And one body of records actually pertains to those land records. And you get the legal description of the land. As I said, everyone, including the babies, got allotments of land.
That's
so it's incredible. People have no idea. And especially over the years, land was stolen. People were swindled out of their land, tricked out of the land, or taxed out of their land because freedmen lands were not protected. If you were on the blood roll, your lands were protected. And so it's very interesting. But she gives a wonderful workshop in terms of how to even interpret those plat maps once you see them. And I know Terry, having found those allotment maps, he's really excited because he's like, oh my God, here you can zoom in
Now you can see it.
and see it. Absolutely, absolutely. So there's sort of his session is complementing what she's teaching. Also teaching in the track is Nika Sewell-Smith, who will be talking about Cherokee Freedmen records, and of course, she does share some wonderful stories with the community in terms of not just how she discovered her Cherokee ancestors, Cherokee Freedmen ancestors, but also the different kinds of records, and they are extensive. And of course, then I give an overview from several different perspectives of the basic records for exploring freedmen, which those basic records being enrollment records, application jackets, and land allotment records, but also some supplemental records, how to find the stories when you go to the massive oral history project out of the University of Oklahoma conducted in the 1930s, the exact same time the slave narrative project was going on in the 1930s. The Indian Pioneer Project was going on in Oklahoma. 116 volumes of interviews of people who lived in what is now Oklahoma before statehood. Remember, statehood was 1907. These interviews.
Now, wait, when you say statehood in 1907, that's where Indian Territory becomes the state of Oklahoma, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Absolutely correct. But these people were interviewed in the 1930s. So there were some formerly enslaved people interviewed.
People, yeah.
And there's some wonderful freedmen who were interviewed and telling their life story, amazing stories. Some even talk about the time of removal, which was the 1830s during the Trail of Tears. Some talk about various individuals and things that happened to them. And again, I talk about other supplemental records such as the Dunn roll for Creek Freedmen and the old series cards, and of course the earlier pre-Dawes records. The Dawes records were between 1898 and 1914, but I talk about records from the 1860s onward through the 1880s and 90s. So we're really excited, and we have 20 people enrolled, and I'm just thrilled. And
I got a question.
Yes. Question is, what's the question?
And it's going to come back also to the two Janices, but right now, since you're here, I would like to know, what is the number one, I guess, what is the number one assumption or question? I don't know quite how to phrase it, that people misunderstand when they're researching Native American ancestry. And let me give you an example, that your average African American believes they all have Native American ancestry because there's some oral histories. But as we know, DNA is coming up, and it denotes that there's probably European ancestry versus Native American.
Correct.
And it's not that grandma told the wrong story, but maybe someone told her the wrong story.
Right.
So is there a couple myths that you guys address throughout the 3 days of MAAGI?
Well, I deal with that a bit because as you've just clearly pointed out, many families of African descent have this story of grandma or grandpa or great grandma or whomever being from any particular Native American tribe. And a lot of times the affiliation is based on physical appearance. Physical appearance has nothing to do with one's history, one's heritage, one's identity, but many people tend to think that it does. Everyone's heard the story. Oh, grandma's hair was so long that she could, and I always pause after the word could, and people usually finish my sentence. She could sit on her hair. And but I hear it all.
I heard that one in my family.
You had that? Did you have that? Is that what you said?
Yeah, we had that, but also in Vicky in the chat room had the other one that I had in my family, and I know that one definitely got squashed by DNA. And what Vicky says is often people believe the tribe for their family is Blackfoot or Blackfeet,
I hear
despite their family being rooted in the South.
Right. And first of all, the Blackfoot / Blackfeet same people, one tribe. Their base has always been what is now Browning, Montana. They have not migrated, and I've pointed that out to people. Oh, well, they could have left and then married great grandpa. No, they didn't. And usually when I hear Blackfoot, I just kind of just say,
I heard it all my life.
I know.
Well,
and
my
it's
dad passed in 1997, and that's when that story ended.
Yeah, it happens all the time. And of course, I've even heard mixtures. Oh, no, they weren't Blackfoot. They were Cherokee Blackfoot or Blackfoot Cherokee. No such thing. Although, if you do a Google search, you'll probably find a website. But that website belongs to a group that we call Plastic. Those are Plastic Indians who they have a great city.
Oh.
They got a flag. They're Pretendians. But and you're never going to find any record that represents such a community because the community did not exist. But it is difficult because, and one of the things that I point out when I address the myths, many people will claim Native ancestry. Again, maybe someone said something inaccurate to grandma as opposed to grandma lying to the family. But the point is that, and this happens not just in families of African descent, there are many who will see the portrait of someone on the wall in so-and-so's house. Oh, that's our great-great-grandmother, and she has the two braids or whatever. But oftentimes the story originated to describe this person to avoid association with the real person from whom it came. With many Black families, that hair texture, complexion, etc., came from a white ancestor. And sometimes it came from a relationship that was not a consensual relationship. In many white families, there's someone who's a little bit browner than everyone else in the family group picture. Oh, that's our Indian ancestor, to avoid association with people of African descent. And those stories stick. And but again, genealogy is about research and about documentation. And well, go find, your folks are from North Carolina, go find one piece of paper that says anyone was Blackfoot. You will be searching probably until you take your last breath for that. At the same time, genealogy, of course, is about the proof, it's about the evidence. It is important that you find information in the history. And it does not mean that someone does not have Native ancestry. There are people who say, oh, see, I've got 2% Native. But then what is the group? Don't claim a group that never lived there. The Blackfeet never lived east, I won't even say east of Appalachian Mountain Range. They did not live east of the Continental Divide. So, but who did live there? Try and study that local history. Perhaps that Native ancestry came through someone who was indigenous to that community, and you're not going to find Blackfoot anywhere, certainly along the eastern seaboard. Oh yeah, but they're really cold, and I've heard people make up another name. But
would you recommend people that don't have ancestors from any of those 5 tribes to take your track?
Oh, absolutely. Number one, my goal is to certainly train people. It's beyond looking for your own personal history, because, you know, we're all about the stories. And there's a story in these records. And keep in mind, the tribes that came and ended up in what is now Indian Territory or Oklahoma, these are tribes that came from the Southeast. They came from Mississippi. They came
Well, that's true.
They came from North Carolina. They came from Eastern Tennessee. They came from some of the same communities. And so it is important as you're studying the families. Well, who can you identify that came during the years of the Indian removal? Anyone who was older than 67, 68 years old probably came during the removal. Now, where did they come from? Well, okay, well, where's the slaveholding family from? Oh, they're from Georgia. Oh, this slaveholding family actually came out of eastern Mississippi or western Alabama. So yes, by all means, because people who have ties to these 5 tribes also have ties to the Southeast. Absolutely.
Well, were the interview records available? Where do people find them?
Two places you can find the records, both the enrollment cards. And remember, the enrollment cards did not mean they were enrolling in a tribe. They were already in the tribe. The enrollment cards are records that were filled out to have their name enrolled or placed upon a roll for people who are eligible for land. You can find them on two spots. You can find them on Ancestry, and you can find them on fold3.com. The same way with the application jackets. You can find those on Ancestry, and you can find those also on fold3.com. The land records, the allotment jackets, where people actually got their land. So, and this, we're talking the time period between 1898 and 1914, when they went through this huge interview process. 91,000 people were processed during this time period. And as a result, for example, if someone has someone from Mississippi, by all means take the class, because the Mississippi Choctaw records, there are about 7,000 of those files are Mississippi Choctaws. In addition, many people have that Cherokee story in their history. But what about, now these are not part of the Dawes records, but there are the records of the Eastern Cherokees. And of the Eastern Cherokee applications, we're talking close to 90,000 people apply. Now they were applying to try and get land, okay?
Right.
And they were also applying, some of them were trying to get that one-time payment of $133. People from all over the country. You see people from New York City who are applying. The fact, however, is that those files are rich. So the Eastern Cherokee applications cover multiple states, the Mississippi Choctaw applications, and of course, those records, the Dawes records that pertain to the 5 tribes. And we go into detail about what those records are.
Okay. I have one last question, then I'm going to go to Janice Minor Forte with her myth question, and then to Janice Lovelace. Rosalind asked that, is it true that Blackfoot was a term meaning of mixed race, Black and Indian?
No, people have made that up since they found out proof that they weren't Blackfoot.
Okay.
Oh, well, it's a term that, no, it didn't. Where do you see that? You cannot find a piece of paper that says it. If there's not even one piece of paper, oh, Henry Jenkins over here living in Giles County, Tennessee, he's really Blackfoot. What? Where in Tennessee history are you going to find that term?
Right.
Because that community did not exist in that geographic community. That's why, as you always say, go local. Go local. Find your local history. There were indigenous people throughout the Southeast. Find the right group of people who were indigenous to that area.
Well, and that's something they'll pick up in track 1A is definitely about soaking up the local records and resources first before you even think about going anywhere else. You got to learn that community, learn what laws were in place. And it doesn't matter if you're researching European, African American, Native American, or anything. And so none of the classes that are taught throughout MAAGI, and I'm kind of answering a question here also, they're not that they're specific regions or areas, because it's throughout the South, and we're also talking about some things that are up the East Coast, the New England area.
That's right. That's correct.
So we don't do regional as far. Now, we might share collections and things that are regional. So I'm going to go to Janice Minor Forte. Is there a myth that people that you have commonly heard that come into track 3 that you guys are able to respond to regarding your, slave era type research? Is there any myths that you know of that get, kind of squashed? We got the 1870 brick wall, which is kind of a myth, because people are finding their ancestors prior to 1870 on a daily basis. So Janice Minor Forte.
Yes.
You have
one
any there?
I have heard for 30 plus years.
Oh no.
And when it comes up, we just roll our eyes and wiggle our head. I know my grandmama was an Indian because she had high cheekbones.
Oh, Lord.
To go with the long hair that Angela mentioned.
Yes.
That's the number one.
Yep.
Or I am absolutely, definitely sure my people were from Alabama.
Mhm.
And you find out they weren't from Alabama. They came, the slave owner brought them through Alabama on his way someplace else.
Right.
So
right.
we teach people how to research slash how to dig, how to
Absolutely.
dig the deepest. And usually, yeah, they find out the truth. But
Yeah.
you have
Great
to,
example.
you have to wonder why people think, just assume that their grandmother or their grandfather was an Indian. And
Mhm.
it is because, I say, because so much stuff had been taken from us that we grasp
Right.
onto anything we can to be normal. Our land was taken from us. Our country was taken from us. Our
Mhm.
language was taken from us. Our
And our
heritage,
beliefs.
our heritage, our history. It was
Mhm.
all. Our babies were taken from us. When the slave master decided that he was going to sell that baby, you know, grandma had just had that baby, and the slave master said, "It's a boy. I'm going to sell it." So
Yeah.
that's
I
why
hear
I
your
think,
background.
yeah, that's why I think, I really think so many Black folks grab onto that. My grandmother was an Indian.
hmm
Yep.
And I think Maggie helps in all of the tracks with a lot of these myths. It doesn't matter which one. And now I'm going to go to Janice Lovelace, Dr. Lovelace. What is one of the biggest myths that you guys come across throughout DNA?
You know what I think in DNA, one of the things that people struggle with are the ethnicity estimates.
Yeah.
They're
Oh,
like,
yes.
you know, they'll say, but I thought we were from, you know, filling up Nigeria, and it only says I have 10% Nigerian, or they think they're 100% African, and then they're surprised when it's maybe 10 or 20% European or something else. And so they'll say, oh, well, the DNA must be wrong because grandma said.
Mhm.
As
Our grandmas
Angela
are really
knows,
something, aren't they?
and as Angela knows, you get a lot of the folks who think that they're Native American, and there's no DNA that suggests that they're Native American. And then it's like, well, it's wrong.
Right.
Right.
Because all the other things, you know, grandma had high cheekbones and the long braids, and that's what they said.
Mhm.
So I think that's one of the struggles that people have, is that they don't like the results.
Right. That's true.
And is it true, and we hear this all the time, that your average African American in this country has up to 25% European ancestry?
That is what I have heard as well.
Mhm.
And when I work with other folks, I have yet to find anybody who has 90% plus African, unless they're recent immigrants from Africa.
Right. That's true.
But if
Yeah, I
people
do
have
see people in the
ancestry,
70s and 80s, but I haven't
Yeah.
seen, well, there's been a few on finding your roots or something. Remember, there was somebody, one of the movie star folks, had 80 or 90, was it Oprah or somebody, high 80s on African and stuff. And so very interesting, because as when we hit the shores here, no matter where it's at, South Carolina, the Gulf Coast, wherever, the mixtures are going to happen. They're going to happen. That's just what happened. And we understand that. So, and again, as far as the ethnicities, how much are we supposed to believe that those are all accurate? And you can see Karen Kay is even showing some of her on the screen and on her picture where she's at. And so how should we take that? How valid is that?
they are estimates.
Okay.
The validity comes in continental numbers.
Mm.
So if you are showing that you have something that's European, then yeah, you've got some European. If you're showing that something is African, yes, you've got something there that's African. But when we start talking about countries, people
Mhm.
moved around, and the people
Yeah.
who are living in some countries now, 10 generations ago, that's not where they came from.
Mhm.
So I just try to say to folks, it's an estimate. It's an estimate. It gives you an idea of.
Mhm.
And then 6
And I
months from now,
feel,
the company will redo their numbers, and then you won't be that thing anymore.
and they always have updates.
They do.
And I
They
have
do.
tested with 23andMe, Ancestry, My Heritage, Living DNA, and mine pretty much are the same, pretty much. So they're consistent estimates. And I also, like I mentioned, the National Geographic and Family Tree DNA. And I've had other family members, depending on what my goal was, what I was
Mhm.
looking for. And so Portia in the chat room said she took a DNA test and she has 94% African. And again, which test was that? You know, we're not challenging, we're just questioning, because when you get the high, you know, you question where are they from. And then Karen K has a comment also. She took Portia took Ancestry. So that's autosomal. And so Ancestry DNA.
Well, I did Ancestry, I've done 23andMe, and I've done My Heritage, and I've done Family Tree DNA. I did the National Geographic, which was the MT, and got uploaded to Ancestry back in the day, which they no longer do MT DNA kits.
Right.
Now, instead of having Native American, it came out European Jewish.
Ah.
What people don't realize is that in the South, some of those slave owners were Jewish.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So it may not be Native American, yeah, it could be Jewish. So
absolutely. And like Janice says, is their estimates. So in other words, don't go to the bank and try to cash that DNA check on whatever it is you're connecting to. I do want to make a comment as we kind of close down. Art Thomas had posted a link in the chat room and had asked if anyone heard of the Randolph slaves, the 381 that were freed by John Randolph in 1846, and they ended up settling in Pequot, Ohio. If not, he put the link in there. And in that link, you will find people listed by their name, age, and relationships. And you know, Art, and I'm very familiar coming from where I'm living at now. And of course, the research up in Ohio. So thank you for sharing that. Let me see, is there any other questions? I think Mr. Burke put in that he's 97% African, and that was from Ancestry DNA also. So again, I congratulate everybody. Does anyone on the panel here have any parting words they want to say about MAAGI? And some of the folks that are in the chat are actually MAAGI alums that have attended MAAGI. And also, if there's any last questions you'd like to ask any of the instructors and coordinators, please put it in the chat. And I'm going to say, Angela, do you have any parting words as far as MAAGI? And of course, we're going to look to 2023, you know, once we get through July 12th through the 15th.
Right. Well, one thing I'll just certainly say, expect to have a different kind of experience. At a conference, you go from one room to another, and the topics can be totally unrelated to the session that you sat in previously, because you're at a conference and you're just sort of, hey, let me sit down on this one on land records. The next session could be DNA. The session after that could be military records. Whereas at MAAGI, you have 12 classes all related to the same theme, whether it's getting started as a beginner, 12 classes on that, or an intermediate level, whether it's DNA and the African American family, you have 12 classes, depending upon whether you're beginner or intermediate, whether you're looking at pre and post slavery era, 12 classes are related to that. If you're looking at the freedmen of the 5 tribes, 12 classes related to that. This is unlike any experience that you'll have. And hopefully, maybe in 2023, we may be back in person, COVID permitting. Let us hope. But this is very much unlike anything you've done. You're going to have assignments, you're going to have projects, and some people will have things that have emerged from being in a class with other like-minded people. And I am just excited when I run into people, whether it's in Clubhouse or King Kofa or Black Jeans Club, and I'm finding, oh, you all were out at MAAGI a year or so ago?
Right.
Wow. You don't often have this happening from a conference. So definitely expect this to be a different kind of experience, as we call ourselves the Teaching Institute, which we are. And we want you to get certainly really just not just in education, but through the right resources and the right records. So I hope we'll see you soon in next month, and 2023, maybe we'll be back in Fort Wayne.
Hopefully we will be. And Janice Minor Forte, Miss, would you like to give any parting words?
She might be muted.
Yeah, she's muted. And why she's unmuting. And thank you, Dr. Lovelace, for responding to Danielle's question in the chat. Janice?
No, Angela said it all. Angela
Okay.
put it best. You can't outdo that. Angela put it best.
I agree, because I was going to say something about 1A or 1B, and Angela got it. And what about you, Dr. Lovelace? Any parting words?
Nope, no parting words. I think, Angela, you wrapped it up great.
Thank you.
And Karen Kay, we want to thank you for coming in and watching the questions. Thank you. I'll have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, everybody.